Hello and welcome to another episode of In Person. Today I have chosen someone really controversial and it is very important to get to know him. In spite of everything that's happening around us in Palestine, we have come to awareness of many voices around the world that have been speaking about Palestine even before we knew them. Dan Cohen is a very important one of these voices, not because he was like, if you search for him, he's a journalist based in Palestine, not because he's a Jewish American based in Palestine and had a documentary about Gaza only, but because he has written in almost every news outlet out there that has ever written about this, what they call conflict, but it is a right to exist and it is a freedom to free these people from occupation. Before I dive into explaining a lot, allow me to welcome you one more time, Dan Cohen. I'm so proud to be talking to you right now. You're such a great journalist.
Thank you, Gadi, for having me. It's a great honor to be with you.
Dan, this sort of new volunteer work that we're doing on the بالمباشر platform involves trying to introduce some personalities, especially to our viewers who are not bilingual, because we will have this translated. Allow me to give you the microphone so that you can introduce my Lebanese friends and community to yourself, your work in the past decade or so.
Sure. So my name, as you said, is Dan Cohen. I'm an American journalist. I live in Washington, D.C. I've been in journalism for, I guess, 10 or 11 years now, and I started my journalistic work in Palestine. I thought I could do a lot there because I'm a Jewish American, so I have maximum privilege, which I could exploit for good reasons. So of course I never took Israeli citizenship because that I would not do just as a matter of principle. But I was in Palestine from 2014 to 2017, um, most of the time, all over the occupied territory in 1948, in the West Bank, in Gaza. I spent 7 months approximately in Gaza, beginning in the 2014 war. Towards the end of that war was the first time I was able to go, and my work on in Gaza became a documentary called Killing Gaza, which I made with the journalist Max Blumenthal, and we released that in 2018. You can see that for free online. If you just search for Killing Gaza, you can find it. Um, and I spent a lot of time in Jerusalem following sort of Zionist extremist groups who are agitating around Al-Aqsa, for example, which is a documentary I'm working on right now, um, during this Gaza genocide. And I've worked on a number of other issues. I have a documentary on Haiti, for example, which is undergoing a revolutionary process at this very moment. Um, so I try to pay attention a lot to Palestine and to the region, and to geopolitics and empire in general.
Then I have a lot to ask you. I'm gonna hope to make the best out of the time that we have to ask you about what you've seen, especially because recently you have published a video where you say that if ISIS was a state, it would be Israel. We will talk about Israeli rightist groups and what you've been monitoring and following and documenting in Jerusalem, and also your documentary about Gaza. But allow me to ask the first hard question to start with. I'm sure as a Jewish person, you have been brought up and you have had Zionists around you. I don't know about your upbringing, but what started this kind of awareness? What brought you to Gaza to document this? How did you have this revelation in terms of this cause, Palestine?
Well, certainly I was brought up in a Zionist environment, as sort of that's how, especially secular Jews in the United States are brought up, because we don't really learn about the religion so much, or the theology so much in synagogues. All of these religious concepts are hollowed out and filled with Zionism. And they don't actually tell you what Zionism is. They don't tell you that it's a political ideology. You don't even ever hear the word Zionism. Would You just are told that being a good Jew means supporting Israel, and Israel is supposed to be my second home in case things go bad in the US, or it's some kind of ancestral home. And we just sort of take that for granted. But it's also, so they tell us that it's a liberal democracy where everyone coexists, and it's some kind of paradise for everyone living there. And so you're raised with a certain image as kind of a liberal-minded American westernized Jew. And then you go there as I went, well, actually, I really started to study history when I was in university, becoming exposed to progressive ideas. And I took a history class on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that sort of shocked me in a way. And I began to really develop my anti-Zionist point of view just by reading history and observing. This was around Operation Cast Lead, the slaughter in Gaza in 2008, 2009, and then there was the 2012 slaughter. And so seeing these gruesome acts of violence from the overwhelmingly militarily superior Israeli military that is funded with my dollars and done in my name and supposed to be some sort of liberal democracy, wiping out entire families of innocent people. Well, this is completely at odds with the image. So I spent most of my 20s trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life professionally. I couldn't be motivated to just go have a career to make money. I wanted to do something to try to improve the world in some kind of way, to contribute to something. And so I decided journalism was a good thing I could do. And the place that made the most sense for me, that I had developed a knowledge and that I could do a lot, I felt, was Palestine. So I went to Palestine. Months later, the war on Gaza started in 2014, and I managed to get a press card from the Israeli government that gave me access to Gaza. And so I just became kind of singularly focused almost on Gaza, on documenting not only the war of 2014, but the aftermath. So I spent most of the time I spent in Gaza was after the ceasefire, showing people not allowed to rebuild their homes, suffering through the winter, through the summer, in all the cruelest ways possible. I saw it really as if I had access to the Warsaw Ghetto in the 1940s before it was exterminated. And so that was kind of my mindset, and that's what became Killing Gaza. So basically that's it.
Dan, your hard work is really appreciated around the world, and it's not only your documentary. You have been speaking up most recently about the internal Israeli politics. So now your answer was you started looking at the history and you understood it was wrong and you came. Well, why is the Israeli settler society, the occupiers here, why is more than 90% of them not reading that history? And why are they parading under the banners to kill us all day long? Do you think it's only awareness that is needed, or there's something wrong with that society? Let's dive into the discussion right away. Why are these human, I call them the Jews that are human shields for the occupation, why are they still, there are people who are like wholeheartedly protesting against allowing food into Gaza, and they are like, they want people to starve, and they're saying it. Why? Can you help explain?
I think Israelis are, simply put, the most propagandized people in the world, more so than even Americans. And Americans, we consume propaganda all day long, but Israel's like a much more extreme version of the United States. And it really comes down to the ideology of Zionism that is promoted to in every way. It's the structure of the society. Everything is militarized. There is no, there's nothing. It's basically a military with a state. And so, from the time a baby is born in Israeli society, It is being primed to hate other babies, to hate the other babies on the other side of the wall, essentially, to the point where, you see small children saying incredibly not just racist and hateful, but violent and genocidal things. And so by the time, these people are becoming teenagers and then young adults, they're ready to go into the army and they see the Palestinians or the Lebanese or whichever enemy it happens to be at the moment, as basically something that has to be exterminated, that is an existential threat to them. This is, of course, the way they do this is to use the memory of the Holocaust and the trauma of the Holocaust, to basically say that the only thing stopping another Holocaust from happening is the existence of Israel as an aggressive settler state that is in constant conflict. This is the only way to exist. And so they teach that all of the other countries and all the other peoples around who resist in any way, they are all basically modern incarnations of Nazis. That, the Nazis were another incarnation of another ancient people that wanted to destroy the Jews. And so, they say that in every generation there's someone that tries to kill the Jews, but, we have to kill them. And so they see this long sort of fabricated history, as something that is just inescapable, and that anti-Semitism is inescapable. And so you have to just be in a constant state of war and conflict until you can defeat your enemies. And so exterminate them, which is, if you look at what the Israel's recipe with Gaza has been, it is to punish Gaza and kill, mow the lawn, they call it, kill young people, just kill generations of young people. And then now it's since October 7th, there's been a switch in the sort of Zionist mentality where it went from maintain this conflict, you could say, with Gaza, pretending that it's equal, when of course it's not, because Israel controls everything surrounding Gaza, what goes in and out, its airspace, its seas, its borders, and can bomb it at any time or anything like that. It is still under occupation. And now, since October 7th, the switch has flipped in Israeli society, where it's now exterminate the Gaza Strip, because they didn't accept their status as besieged, occupied people. And if they don't accept that, well, that's the best they were going to get. So exterminate them.
Well, Dan, you really said something very important about how they view other countries. I'm sure you are aware of Lebanese politics, and I'm sure you are aware how divided we are. And we have a whole lot of people in Lebanon that speak about the resistance as a bigger threat rather than the Israelis. I would like to, if you would share with us what you know based on your studies of the Zionist ideology. What do they think of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, all of us? What do they have in mind? What's the Zionist plan about Lebanon?
Well, the Zionist plan for Lebanon is the same as it is for Palestine. There's, the idea of Zionism is completely expansionist. It doesn't stop. It doesn't have any borders. It doesn't have any borders to this day. Israel does not define what its borders are. So, of course, it occupied Lebanon for many years, as it has occupied not only Palestine, but it continues to occupy Syria. It occupied Egypt for many years. You now see increasingly in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, open expressions of desire to conquer and settle not only Gaza, but other countries, Lebanon, Syria. They see this. The Zionist ideologues that are in power today see Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, even parts of Saudi Arabia, Iraq. They see this all as part of greater Israel. And so it doesn't matter for, the Israelis, of course, want a collaborator class in each of these countries to do their bidding. And so that is precisely what they're looking for in Lebanon, and they have found in previous years, of course, there have been collaborator classes in Lebanon that basically did the bidding of the Israeli occupation. So the thing is, now we have Israel openly saying, and in think tanks they discuss it. Even in the U.S. military, a U.S. military publication, I reported on this, that they talked about there has to be an invasion of Lebanon that will make Beirut look like Gaza. And then they will occupy up to the Litani River indefinitely. So
you're saying that the U.S. military has spoken about it?
there was a study that was written by an Israeli think tank analyst who was very hawkish, who published in the top U.S. military journal a call to not only ethnically cleanse and settle Gaza, but also to attack Lebanon, to destroy Lebanon. So for many on the this is a reflection on the Israeli right, which is of course completely dominant. They see, well, with the experience of Gaza, that you can't have an armed group on your border or next to you because they could attack you at any time, which has a certain logic to it, of course. But they see the same logic with Hezbollah, which is, of course, stronger and more experienced and has a bigger arsenal than Hamas. So the idea is, yeah, of course, the Israelis, if I'm Israeli, of course, I have to defeat them, attack them, however it may be. And this idea has been published, yes, in a U.S. military journal, the premier U.S. military journal as well. I wrote about that in my outlet, Uncaptured Media.
Then let me try and highlight a little bit about how hard it was for you, especially since this war started. You have been receiving death threats. It is not easy for a Jewish person to speak out against Israel. I tend to think it's a little bit harder than it is for other journalists. You get even dehumanized on a daily basis more than your peers. Can you share with us what you've been going through, because you're saying these things? Have you been receiving death threats inside the United States from activists, or it's only on social media?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I get death threats, but I don't really take them very seriously. And they don't change what I do or impact me in any way. And so,
but you have never been approached as like threatening you is an anti-Semitic thing to do. You have never been protected by these protect from anti-Semitism committees.
Oh no, I mean, it's quite the opposite. That's the irony, is that the Anti-Defamation League, for example, has publicly attacked me. And this is a group that, of course, is supposedly dedicated to combating anti-Semitism. The Israeli embassy, the Israeli consulate in the United States, they have repeatedly attacked me. I was denounced by the Israeli consulate in New York as a spokesperson for Hamas. I
So even if you're a Jewish person whose ancestry survived the Holocaust in Europe, because I think you are from Eastern Europe, basically. So you are a son of survivors. So even you're not considered Jewish anymore if your ideas are against Zionism.
Right, exactly. Because Zionism's real target is Judaism. Zionism's would fail if it couldn't claim to be in the name of Judaism. It would simply collapse. That's why it has to have a sort of moral and ideological underpinning to say we suffered the Holocaust. Well, no, Israel didn't suffer the Holocaust. Israel didn't exist until after the Holocaust. Israel has to get reparations from Germany, because of the Holocaust. Even though it wasn't Israelis per se that were persecuted, it was European Jews. So the entire logic of Zionism depends on its association, a false association with Judaism. And so if you are a Jewish person who challenges that, then you are targeted. You are the enemy. You are denounced as a self-hating Jew. All of these kinds of tropes. And this, really is I would say, primary form of anti-Semitism today in the United States, in Canada, in the West, is Zionist anti-Semitism.
It's really great that we are here in the discussion when we're talking about the difference between Judaism and Zionism. And in your own words, you say Zionism's real target is Judaism. Can you tell us about the ideology, like what you have seen in Jerusalem, and what is it really like? Can you re-articulate what you have said in your latest video about if ISIS had a state, it would be Israel? How is that? What does it look like from inside?
Well, I mean, what ISIS accomplished in terms of holding territory for a period of time until it was rolled back and eventually territorially defeated by the resistance, by Hezbollah, by the Syrian army, by Iran, by popular militias, that does not hold a candle to the accomplishments of Israel. I mean, there are so many ways that you could compare Israel and ISIS. First, in their geopolitical utility. Of course, there's a famous Defense Intelligence Agency cable from the Obama administration that foresaw what they called the growth of a Salafist state, a principality in eastern Syria, shortly after ISIS, the Islamic State, appeared. Now, this, of course, served imperial designs, imperial plans to weaken post-colonial states that resist U.S. and Israeli hegemony in the region. Israel, of course, does the same thing. It's a project in many ways to not only rid Europe of its Jewish population, but also to weaken the pan-Arab movement, to have a beachhead in the middle of the Arab world, of course. Now that's been for many, many years now, for what, 60, 75 years. You can also look at, so they have similarities there. You could also look at who goes to join the Islamic State and who goes to join the so-called Jewish state. Well, it's outcasts from Western society who don't actually know much about the religion that they claim to represent, or they've gotten some twisted version from it, and that has landed on sort of often an identity crisis. Because, for example, like in the US, if you're just a Jewish American white person in the United States in this kind of empty cultural morass of Western capitalism, then what are you? What is your culture? What are your roots? You don't have any connection. You're just a replaceable part. And so maybe in the suburbs or in New York City or whatever, and all of a sudden this faraway country is telling you that you belong here. You are part of this, and you can go there and just immediately be part of something much greater, and take Israeli citizenship and join. Of course, we saw similar things with the Islamic State, where some wife in London would go and join the Islamic State and go and slaughter. I mean, there are so many parallels. Of course, as I said, the accomplishments of the Islamic State are nothing compared to Israel. Israel, has diplomatic. It's at the United Nations.
It's illegal. It's illegal ISIS. It's
right.
legalized the slaughter.
Exactly. It has nuclear weapons. It has an entire military funded, a large military funded by the United States and European Union. I mean, the difference, I guess, in some ways, is that Zionism emerged from, sort of European liberal politics in a way, from nationalist politics in Europe, and so the idea of Theodor Herzl and the early Zionist ideologues was to have kind of a European
Secular.
kind of, yes, a European settler state, to have, a Vienna in but only of Jews in the Middle East. So whereas, like, the ideologues of ISIS were not thinking in this kind of European way. So, it's not exactly a perfect one-to-one comparison, but there are many, many similarities.
Well, you did say it is what if ISIS had nuclear weapons? That would be Israel. Well, this is where I want to ask you, based on your study and your testimonies and your day-to-day experience inside Palestine and with these people and how they're carrying on their oppression and their apartheid state, even in times of so-called truce or peace, because I don't think there's one day where there's no Palestinian killed or harassed or oppressed. So I don't think there's ever been peace in Palestine ever since the Nakba. But regardless, in the times where there's no full-blown war, it doesn't end. I want to ask you about this ISIS with a nuclear weapon. How dangerous is it today, and what can we, based on what you're seeing, what can we expect in the coming few weeks, days, months? Because right now we are like 5 months into this. I don't even want to call it a war. It is annihilation. It is like genocide. There's no two parties fighting here. They are like children and civilians and tanks and missiles.
Right,
What do you
right.
think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is right, that it's not really a war in the sense of, a war is when you have two states fighting. But we don't have, that's not what is happening here. There's the state of Israel, and there is an occupied people resisting in any way they can, and basically, with no help from the outside. Of course, they have some help from the axis of resistance, but largely, the weapons are manufactured in Gaza. It's a very homemade resistance. So in terms of
Where does this take
what
us, you think?
where does this
After
take
five
us?
months, after
Yeah.
5 months of this carnage, um, there seems to be a political deadlock for Netanyahu. There seems to be no way out of this war, not even the American kind of negotiation, prisoner swap has led into anything. What do you think? Where do you think this will go from here?
Well, all the talks about the prisoner swap from even from the Americans, have been a farce, because, we saw Kamala Harris a couple days ago in the iconic bridge in Selma, in Alabama, on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where she said, "We need a ceasefire, but then for 6 weeks." So then a ceasefire and prisoner exchange, but only for 6 weeks. So then it resumed. So basically saying, Hamas, give up all of the captives, and then we're going to resume bombing you. So it was a complete farce. The U.S. has just completely taken the Israeli side, whatever Netanyahu says, the entire time. So there is no mediation from the United States. It's basically just a routine to give some kind of separation in the image that the United States, the Biden administration, has an image that it's trying to rein Israel in. So it's a total farce. But in terms of where things go, I mean, I can't make any, I don't want to speculate, but I can lay out a few things. One, Netanyahu is as soon as this war, whatever slaughter ends, Netanyahu's head is going to be on the chopping block in Israeli society. Israeli society is incredibly angry at the establishment, starting with Netanyahu, for allowing October 7th to happen, because they understand that which is true. This is true, that Netanyahu's recipe for dealing with Gaza and dealing with Hamas has always been, and dealing with Palestinians in general, is to keep them divided. Okay, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, have them rule the West Bank, and have, of course, have Hamas rule Gaza. Netanyahu basically accepted Hamas's rule in Gaza as long as they stay weak enough that they can't really threaten Israel. And Hamas projected weakness to make Israel believe that they weren't really a threat. Israel also has an incredibly corrupt political establishment and military that did not understand there was an actual serious threat from the Gaza Strip. So Netanyahu is blamed for this failure first and foremost. So basically, Netanyahu and the generals, they all say, well, we'll have some kind of national inquiry commission as soon as the war ends. But so they don't want the war to end because then the Israeli public comes for them. Not only that, you have Netanyahu is mired with all kinds of corruption scandals and indictments. And so if he declares a ceasefire, then the people in the government protecting him, which are the more right-wing elements, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and their parties are the ones guaranteeing Netanyahu's legal immunity, but they want the war to continue forever. So if Netanyahu stops the war, then they're going to walk away, his government collapses, and he will be opened up for prosecution, let alone all of the hate and animus from the Israeli public. So basically, Netanyahu's political and legal survival are at stake for him. He's the one in charge. That said, and then of course, Israeli society, they don't want to say, okay, we killed a lot of Palestinians, we punished them really hard. They want to like exterminate and expel, and of course build settlements in Gaza. There are many Israelis and Israeli soldiers who really believe in building settlements in all of Gaza, but they at least believe they'll get the north of Gaza. So where does this go? I mean, it's just how long will this bloodletting go? I do think Israel has entered like into it's in something that it can't extract itself. It cannot walk this back. If on October 7th, Israel said, wow, Hamas just carried out a massive operation that wiped out our entire Gaza division and took a huge amount of captives, said, okay, we need to negotiate the release of these captives and like an entirely new equation of how we're going to exist. That's the only way that things could have happened. But Zionism doesn't have that in its political DNA. It's only aggression, killing, bombing, extermination. So as I said, this switch has flipped in the Zionist mentality. How does that switch go somewhere else? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's almost like it's gone into a self-destruct mode, but it's going to kill a whole lot of people before it like destroys itself.
It's funny you say they are actually on a self-destruction path. This is the sentence that I said like maybe 3 years ago in an interview with British MP George Galloway. And that was because I had read a book, which is a series of articles. It's called Israel, the Threat from Within. And the writer was a Jewish person, a Jewish journalist called Chris, and he was talking about how this rightist movement and this ongoing Zionist switch of killing everyone, and the failure and the fall of the secular kind of Zionism is the way Israel will end itself. Mm-hmm. So now you have answered that you think this will go on indefinitely. Nothing says that the war would stop.
I don't see any indications that it will stop. I mean, public opinion here in the United States is pretty much against the war, but the Biden administration doesn't really care. You can see this kind of revolt in the Democratic Party against Biden for carrying out this genocide, supporting and arming Netanyahu to carry out this genocide, and they don't care. You know, they're not doing anything. They're just doing PR stunts, talking about building a pier into Gaza and throwing, you know, aid from the air that's actually
Kills.
crushing and killing people. So, you know, nothing fundamentally is changing. And the opposition, of course, Trump, well, we know that he's completely
He wants
controlled
to
by Zionists
eradicate.
too.
He
Exactly. So
wants to
there's
eradicate Hamas at any cost. This is what he said, no?
exactly. So we don't have any kind of, you know, real opposition here either. So um I, I don't see I really don't see when this is going to end. I don't know. It could happen, but when I look at the politics and the ideological trajectory of Zionism, you know, and there's no anti-war movement in Israel, of course. I mean, you see these tiny demonstrations that say stop the genocide of like 25 people, and you know, bless those people, but they have zero political power.
Well, here's another question for you then, Dan. Before we go into the last part, I'm gonna ask you about your memories from Gaza. But now I want to ask you about there are small peace movements, and the tide is not changing. Um, So what about since you are in the United States, where is the light in the end of the tunnel? What does America want from establishing uh, that? When do we see a change in America? If now there's elections and nothing is changing, what happens to stop the Americans from helping the Israelis carry on the genocide? When do they stop? At what number? And there's the other question, like if they always wanted war and that switch has always been on, our experience in Lebanon, because the Tammuz war, like the 2006 war, ended in a prisoner swap, although they wanted to gain something and they tried their best to invade. So when there is actual ongoing resistance that is still attacking, and still there are these videos that are coming out with the red triangles. So is there any possibility, as per your following, that the resistance and the actual armed resistance would force the Israelis to stop the carnage?
I mean, if there's anything that can stop Israel, it is, yeah, it's armed resistance, without a doubt. That's force is the only, you know, this is what Israel says about Arabs, is that force is the only language they understand, but this is actually a projection. Force is the only language that Zionists understand, that the state of Israel understands. Um, so you know, obviously the resistance in Gaza does not have the capabilities to, you know, have head-to-head clashes. I mean, they can't, you know, they don't have anything to defend their skies or their seas or anything like that. But they have an incredible network of tunnels that the Israeli military has no answer to. So they have clearly demonstrated they can continue to resist indefinitely. They have the ability to continue to manufacture weapons underground. Israel has zero military achievements in Gaza. They've repeatedly said that, oh, we now have conquered northern Gaza and defeated Hamas, and they pull some troops out of northern Gaza, and Hamas immediately reappears, and the resistance operations continue. They continue to produce these videos showing that there is no degradation in their military capabilities. So it's clear that Israel has no answer for the resistance. And as long as it stays in Gaza, this will continue. And if it goes in, of course, into Lebanon, of course it will do massive destruction to civilian infrastructure and kill many, many innocent people. But again, it won't be able. I mean, look, Israel couldn't win in 2006. It was, you know, before it was forced to withdraw after many years of occupation. Um, what would happen now? Hezbollah is much stronger than it was before. So, I mean, Israel's in a very bad situation in many ways. So,
Well, when does it wake up? Why are the Americans, I mean, the Biden administration, what does it want from this genocide? Does it want to displace it? Do they want to annihilate Gaza and take the gas? What's the actual agenda here? Why isn't anyone stopping them?
Well, there is really no one to stop Israel other than the victims themselves, which is of course what they've done, which Hamas has developed into an armed resistance group over the last what four decades since the 1980s. Um, and of course, there were Palestinian resistance groups then, and there are many native resistance groups throughout the region, whether in Lebanon, Syria, places that are threatened by Israel. So I think ultimately Israel will collapse on its own. I don't think it's going to be some kind of military march of the Quds force from Tehran to Jerusalem that's going to liberate Al-Aqsa in like some kind of picturesque movie scenario. It's going to be that the internal contradictions of the state of Israel, of Zionism, will force it to collapse. And the like I see the United States almost like as a bartender giving its favorite son unlimited drinks more and more. And Israel is very drunk right now and is getting into fights with people that it may not be able to handle at some point. So there are so many different factors going into this that it's just there's just no way to know how this is going to end, what it's going to lead to. But I mean, I don't see a bright future for Israel overall.
Well, I think I would agree with you. I think we will see the internal contradictions of the Zionist entity ending it. They will end themselves, and liberation has cost us a lot of lives and decades of resistance and of resilience. And I think we will see even worse and worse chapters until the right and the righteous prevail. Dan, I want to thank you for all what you have explained. And now I want to dive in the last part of our conversation because I don't have a lot of time. Last 15 minutes, I would like to discuss with you what we have seen because today I think they are building some new highway, seaside port for in Gaza. I don't know what will become of Gaza. I have seen Gaza 1 year before you have visited it in 2014, before that war. I saw it after the 2008 war, but before the 2014. So it was thriving. They were the universities. There were a little bit of destroyed buildings that were like still there but I didn't see or picture what we are seeing today. I never in my life thought that this very old once a temple of sun now turned into a mosque, and the old town Gaza would be totally demolished. The place where Napoleon stayed would be totally demolished. Al-Rimal, Jabalia. I mean, I have seen it and I know how painful it is. But you have actually stayed for 7 months there. Tell me, what are you dealing with on a personal level? I know it's very hard to understand, like the whole city is not there anymore. The whole place, the whole strip is not there anymore. I will give you the last 15 minutes to tell me what was life inside for you, a little bit of insights about your documentary, and how are you personally, psychologically dealing with the trauma that comes from seeing a place you have lived in totally destroyed.
Well, for I would say the first 3, maybe 4 months, I was in shock in a way, where I was able to still work and do my journalism and resist in the media however I can, but it was just total shock that this place I had spent, I don't know, more than half a year, which I guess in the grand scheme of things is not such a long time, but for me had such a deep, deep impact on me. Um, I mean, Gaza for me was the place that like I preferred to be in Gaza of anywhere in Palestine because there were no lies in Gaza. You know, you could see like the West Bank is Ramallah is a lie. You know, it's like a nice it's a little bubble in the occupation and people go out and drink beers and it's like NGO world and it's all fake. It's all money coming in to keep this thing afloat. And then, you know, 1 kilometer away are refugee camps and checkpoints where like kids are being shot. Gaza, there was no false pretenses. It was like life was hard for people. It was very small, but there was a sense of dignity and resistance, of course. You know, you would see billboards that uh, talk about the operations of Al-Qassam in Nahalaz in 2014, and that was something that people were proud of, that they had accomplished something against the occupation. And everything that Gaza was earned, was taken through sacrifice, through blood, through martyrs. There was nothing given to Gaza. And so that it was like a real it's like the heart of resistance for, and I just felt really at home there. And the people were very like salt of the earth, just very genuine. And there weren't so many foreigners there, especially like during the 2014 war and a little bit after. Yeah, you would see some, but compared to like there's foreigners everywhere in Ramallah. In Gaza, there are very few foreigners. And I could even, you know, I could even occasionally, like if I was alone and my beard was long, I could like get in a taxi and people didn't even know I was a foreigner for like 5 minutes until my Arabic kind of ran out. But you know, so
So you
it
do
just
speak Arabic then?
just a little bit, and that was years ago. Like it's degraded, you know, it's gotten worse. But um, you know, and just conversational like taxi Arabic, you know, just basic stuff. Um,
Where did you stay for these 6, 7 months in Gaza?
I lived with friends. Most of the time I lived
Yeah.
with friends, and so I who have
People
left.
receive people there. This is something they
Yeah.
don't know that because there's like waves of solidarity. When
Hmm.
you are in Gaza, everybody wants to host you in their house. I remember dividing my days there to visit three of my friends. I suppose you were like house hopping all the time.
You know, I stayed with like this young couple who had an apartment kind of close to Rimal,
Yeah.
and I just stayed with them and got to know them like extremely well. And they ended up leaving for the US. They're in the US now on the other side of the country. But you know, like all of my friend, most of the people I became friends with are not in Gaza anymore because they were like, you know, most of them spoke English or they were, you know, so like I could
They
interact with
worked
them
on
more.
it. Yeah, they worked to get out. Most of the people that I know have like
Exactly.
worked on themselves to get out of Gaza because it is a prison.
Exactly. And they felt like they don't have any future there. And I, you know, and I completely understand and I support them in what they want to do. So, I don't know as many people in Gaza as I used to, but I mean, there are still some, absolutely, like friends that I'm in touch with who are in tents in Rafah. Um, so, you know, it just had such a deep formative impact on me as a I don't know, kind of beginning journalist in a way, and I seeing this is, I mean, it's what you said. It's that this place does not exist anymore. Um, the places that I knew, the cafes where we would sit on the beach and you know look at the 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 boats out on the sea at night, you know, catching little fish. Those don't exist anymore. These places have been destroyed. The buildings that you know, that we used to walk up the stairs because there was no electricity to take the elevator, those don't exist. So it's like refugee camps are gone. Shati camp, where I, you know, filmed with the Backer boys who were, you know, the boys who survived the 2014 beach bombing, like that doesn't exist anymore. And I see these videos of these Israelis, you know, this stupid comedian on the beach and all these things, and it's just like it's jarring for me. And I always felt like at least Palestine has this one little place that is under siege and is being punished so severely, but is resisting. And now that the thing is, it still is resisting. Now it's underground. The resistance has been literally pushed underground, but it's like the last piece of Palestine that Israel like can't conquer completely is like Al-Aqsa in a way, and the underground tunnel system of Gaza. But I mean, the suffering is just beyond comprehension.
Did you see the tunnels when you were there?
Uh,
Were you given access to tunnels?
Not really. Like I went to film with one of the resistance group, the Al Nasser Salah al-Din, but um they just showed me like a little tunnel where they, carry some rockets. It's in Killing Gaza. You see it, but I didn't get to like go into the tunnels. And when I was in like Shajaiya, for example, um I had to be, we had to be careful to avoid areas where they were digging tunnels, where the resistance was digging tunnels. So this kind of thing. So no, I didn't get to like go, I know people, of course, during the Morsi era went through like the tunnels from Egypt. This is how they got into Gaza. Or actually,
I did.
yeah, right,
I'm one of these people.
right, exactly. So no, I didn't get to experience that, but I mean, it's an incredible feat of engineering what the resistance has done because they understood, you know, exactly
Yeah.
what they're up against. So it's been incredibly painful. I, honestly, I kind of ran into a little bit of a psychological wall. I'm very isolated here in Washington, D.C. It's a very, very, you can imagine all the like most people in Washington, D.C. are not thinking like I am. So, um, it's an isolating place, and so actually I went to Cuba a few weeks ago, with my wife and daughter just to get like a little bit of revolutionary spirit and relax a little bit, and so that was very helpful for me. But I mean, I just feel horrible for everyone there. I mean, I have 7 or 8 Facebook messages from different people, some of whom I know, or maybe 10. Some of them I know, some of them I don't, who are all asking me to promote their fundraiser because they need $40,000 to get them out of Gaza. And I managed to succeed with one, but I don't know how to raise that much money. And it's like people's lives depend on it and their babies. It's just beyond comprehension. Just one,
Yeah.
it's the one of the greatest crimes of, I don't know, this century for sure.
Well, Dan, I can understand and relate to what you're feeling. The helplessness is crazy, and in a way, I am proud that I didn't become the human that would normalize a genocide. And the anger and the PTSD and everything that I've been suffering from the past 5 months are just proof that I'm human. And I still can't fathom how someone is living their life normal while people are being starved, babies are being starved in a world that throws away like tons of food every day. This is so unfair. Like it's okay to not be okay. Actually, it's more human.
Exactly.
And I just want to say like this is a chance to send support to everyone who's also surviving the psychological effect of living and witnessing and posting and being in contact with what is happening every day in Palestine. We have 5 more minutes, Dan, and I want to ask you um, uh, to give me like if you could go back to one of the best memories you've had. Let's try for both of our sakes and our viewers to think about like every this is something a practice I've been doing. I think about the most beautiful things I have seen, and I try to make it like stick forever in my brain. Some of the most beautiful scenes or most beautiful memories in Gaza. Would you mind sharing with us? What is the most beautiful thing you remember?
I mean, of course the Gaza sunsets are
Oh yes.
are
Oh
just
yes.
spectacular, and just sitting on the beachside cafes, just sitting with my friends and watching the sunset. And I mean, I was saying before, you see the boats out on the water, and they have these white lights on the boats for fishing, and they look like diamonds just glittering in the sea. And I mean, I remember this, like, one time when we were sitting in the evening, there was one boy who came every day to sell like whatever little candies, little chocolates he had. Kid is like 8 years old, and he would come and we would buy something just to give him some money or whatever. And one day I decided, like, I'm gonna give this kid like 100 shekels, which is the equivalent, I think, of like, I don't know, 15 or $20 or something. And he was kind of in shock, and I said, "Listen, take the money and I want you to go home and just take the night and like, don't work and just go be with your family." And he took it, and then the next day I didn't see him for a little while. My friend told me the next day he saw him, and he said he went home and he took all of the chocolate and ate all of it. And so it's just like, I don't know, I just saw so much suffering of like children especially, and to just be able to give like some little taste of some kind of hope to like a child, for me, was like the best thing. And now I wonder, like, where is that boy? Is he alive? Is he, in a tent in Rafah? Um, is he, how many family members did he lose? Um, did he, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's 10 years later. Did he join the resistance? Like, a lot of those young boys that that were 10 years old when I was there, for sure, some of them joined the resistance. Are they in those videos, those red triangle videos, like getting vengeance for their loved ones? Um, I wish I could be there in a lot of ways. I have a family here, so I can't just, and it's almost impossible to get into Gaza now, but um, it's just a place that, like, I learned so much from and I love so much, that I'm, it just, yeah, it burns me. It's like the Aaron Bushnell, the U.S. soldier, the American soldier who self-immolated. It's like, that's how I feel, and I think that's how so many of us feel every day. And people called him crazy, but what he did is like the most sane thing. Like, how we're all burning inside, and so
Yeah.
that's that's what Gaza is to me.
Well, Dan, this is the most relatable sentiment I have heard from anyone in past months covering the war, because I do think about the people I've met, and especially the little ones. And what happened is I started posting some of their pictures and asking about them, and most of them are married with kids and safe. God, like, grace to God for that. I hope they're all safe and saved in this carnage. But thank you for sharing these memories. Thank you for having the spirit to come all across, like, the oceans, and sit and live here and witness and tell the world about it. And thank you for actually speaking out. It is always easier to watch and say, I didn't know, or I didn't know enough, but to go the extra mile from your own well-being and from your own like calm, to come and join this chaos and witness it. I'm sure this doesn't pay a lot of money, and on the contrary, they pay more money to the people who are on the killer's side. So it always has to be this righteousness inside you that drives you there. And Dan Cohen, unfortunately, our time is up, but I will sure come back with another interview, because I'm sure we have a lot to discuss. And maybe next time we'll discuss more about the ideology that revolves around Al-Aqsa Mosque. I know you have been spending a lot of time reading and studying about this. So maybe after this interview, I will promise the viewers for another in-person talk with you. For now, our time is done. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone on the other side, and hopefully we will have you in liberated Palestine. We will meet you in liberated Palestine in person sometime soon. Dan Cohen joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.